All right, today we're going to talk about a huge shortcut for testing your big idea. I mean, one that could save you a ton of time, a ton of money, and honestly, a lot of stress. And it all comes down to having just one conversation with an industry expert.
You know that feeling, right? You've got this amazing, brilliant idea, but there's that little voice in the back of your head that keeps whispering, what if I'm missing something huge? What if this is just doomed to fail? It's a fear that pretty much every single entrepreneur has.
But what if just one conversation, a short one even, could be the thing that separates a massive success from a really costly failure? That's what we're talking about here. That's the power of finding the right person to talk to.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll dive into the expert advantage and what makes them so valuable. Then, we'll look at a cautionary tale, a pretty big one. After that, we'll get practical, how to find your expert, how to pitch them, and finally, the keys to making that conversation a home run.
All right, let's kick things off with the expert advantage. What is it that makes talking to an expert a genuine shortcut? Well, it all boils down to unlocking some serious insider knowledge.
So when we say industry expert, who are we actually talking about? It's not just somebody who's smart, you know? We're talking about someone with deep, hands-on experience. They know things, trade secrets, little insights that you're just never going to find on Google.
And this slide really nails the difference. You bring the passion, you bring the fresh eyes, they bring the years in the trenches, the battle scars, and that crucial insider knowledge. It's not that they can predict the future, it's just that they have way more information to draw from, so their judgment is just going to be more accurate.
And this is the kind of secret knowledge they have. They can tell you, hey, that idea? Yeah, 3 companies tried it, and here's why they failed. Or they might know about some hidden legal trap, or just the unwritten rules of how things really work in that industry. This is the stuff that can absolutely save you.
So what happens when you don't do this, when you just skip this step? Well, let's look at a real-world example of just how expensive not asking for help can be.
So picture this. You've got a super promising startup. It even got into the famous Y Combinator incubator. And their idea was awesome. They wanted to let people in the US buy cars straight from a website. No dealerships, no haggling. Sounds great, right?
They poured a ton of time and money into building this whole thing out. And then, way too late in the game, they finally have a conversation with an expert who drops this one simple, devastating fact on them. By the way, that's illegal. And we're not talking a small little problem here. Their entire business model was against the law in 48 out of the 50 states, all because of some weird old laws that protect car dealerships. Just think, one conversation months earlier could have saved them everything.
Okay, so I think we're all convinced. This is a must-do. But now the question becomes, how do you actually find these people? Let's get into the practical side of where to look.
Honestly, it's not as complicated as it sounds. It really just boils down to 2 main paths that work incredibly well. Searching things like blogs and news articles, and using a tool like LinkedIn in a really smart way.
So method number 1 is super straightforward. Just use search engines to look for blogs or news sites that cover your industry. And what you're looking for are the names that keep popping up. You know, the people who are always writing about the topic or getting quoted. These people have literally put their expertise out there for everyone to see.
Method 2 is your friend LinkedIn. You can search directly by job titles or for companies that are in your space. And here's a little pro tip for you. Look for former employees of companies you might compete with. In my experience, they're often way more willing to share info because, hey, they're not attached to that company anymore.
Okay, so you've identified a few people. You have some names. Now comes the part that makes a lot of people nervous, starting the conversation. But trust me, it's way simpler than you think.
So what's the best way to reach out? Well, email is fantastic because it's respectful of their time and you're more likely to get a response. Meeting in person? That's the gold standard. You'll get the most information. Phone calls, though, yeah, those are usually the least popular. It just feels like an interruption. Now, you could try an approach like this. It's direct, sure, but it's not very exciting, is it? It kind of puts all the work on them and doesn't really give them a reason to care.
Now this approach, this is a total game changer. It works so well because it's personal. You're showing them you've actually read their work, which makes them feel valued. Then you connect your idea to their world and you ask for their thoughts, not just their time. That's how you get them interested.
So let's just break it down. The formula for a great pitch is actually super simple. Number 1, show you've done your homework. 2, give them just a tiny interesting nugget of your idea. 3, keep it short and sweet.
And 4, ask for their thoughts. That's it. That's the magic formula.
Finally, let's talk about mindset. How do you approach this whole thing to maximize your chances of not just getting a yes, but having a really fantastic, helpful conversation?
It really just comes down to this. Be nice. Be genuinely thankful for their time. Offer to buy them a coffee or lunch. And you gotta understand, these are busy people, so you have to be persistent, but not pushy. You might have to try a few times to get a response, and that's okay.
And that really leads to the most important thing to remember here. This whole process is a numbers game. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Reach out to as many experts as you possibly can. That's how you increase your odds of having these game-changing conversations.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. What's the one thing you're secretly worried about with your idea? You know, the one question you are terrified to ask an expert? Because that's probably the exact question you need to ask.